Almost everyone who has traveled has heard Alistair Cooke on his BBC broadcast, Letter from America. It is said to be the longest-running program in radio broadcasting. Cooke celebrates his 50th year of commentary as an Englishman in his adopted homeland. His role as America's cultural ambassador extends to print and television. He was American correspondent for Britain's major papers and author of several books. He was host of PBS's Masterpiece Theater for 22 years.
To Susan Cooke Kittredge. Her father is Alistair Cooke. His body parts sold. When did you learn your father had fallen victim to basically a human chop shop?
I learned, Nancy, first about it 18 months after my father died, when I received a telephone call from a detective at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, and he asked me if I had heard of the ongoing investigation, and I hadn't. And then he told me that he believed that my father's body was one of the bodies that had been stolen.
Welcome to Crime Soup Podcast. My name is Hannah Kanapis.
And I'm Kaylee.
And today we'll be discussing the arrest and conviction of a man named Michael Mastromarino and the New York Body Snatchers. Okay, so first off, this is a shot in the dark, but do you know who Alistair Cooke is?
That sounds really familiar, but nothing is coming to mind. Maybe it's just the name Alistair.
Are you familiar with PBS's or the BBC's Masterpiece Theater?
No.
You don't know what it is?
No.
Okay, so I'm sure you've probably seen it, but the Masterpiece Theater is something produced in the UK, and it's essentially their equivalent. I'm probably doing this wrong, but it's, I think, their equivalent of like the Hallmark Channel.
Okay.
But they do like British things, like they do like Jane Austen, and they have thespians essentially act out famous stories.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a man named Alistair Cooke, who he was the host of Masterpiece Theater, but he also did a lot of other things. So he's originally British, and he moved to the United States in 1941, like right in the midst of World War II. And he became a really prominent news correspondent, and he worked for, I believe, NBC and the BBC, and he created this really successful radio program called Letters from America, where he essentially gave updates to his mostly British audience about what life is like in America.
Ooh, what'd he say?
A lot of things. And he ran that show, Letters from America, for 58 years.
Whoa.
A really long time. It's been cited as the longest running speech radio show in the world.
Crazy.
And on March 2nd, 2004, at the age of 95, he finally retired. But then, so on March 30th, 2004, around midnight, Cooke died. He was living in New York City at the time. He had been ill with heart disease, but he actually succumbed to lung cancer, which had spread to his bones. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered by his family in Central Park. But this is where the story gets really weird. So after he's cremated and his ashes are scattered and his family moves on, 18 months later, Alistair Cooke's daughter, who is the Reverend Susan Cooke Kittredge, receives a very alarming phone call from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. Apparently, the mortuary where Alistair Cooke's deceased body had been taken, a place called New York Mortuary Service Incorporated in Harlem, promised the family a quick and inexpensive cremation. But what Cooke's family didn't know is that this mortuary harvested his arm, leg, and pelvic bones before cremating him, obviously without consent.
The hell? What do they need those for?
You're gonna find out.
Leave him alone. Damn.
Well, and we've just mentioned that he died of lung cancer that spread to his bones, so why would they take his bones?
Yeah.
Right? They're not good for anything.
No.
In late 2004, a funeral director and freelance embalmer named Joseph Nicelli sold his funeral home in Bensonhurst, New York.
Hold on, really quick. You said he was a freelance embalmer?
Yes. You know, for like kids' birthday parties and stuff.
Just on your resume, freelance embalmer, I come to you. That's not funny, but it's funny. Clearly, it's very funny. Okay.
I think it's a normal thing, but I've never heard it phrased that way.
I'm going to put on my resume that I'm a freelance cremator.
You bring the oven to them?
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes, sorry. Okay.
Okay. So this is kind of a news story. So moving away from Alistair Cook. So in late 2004, there was a funeral director named Joseph Nicelli, and he was in the midst of selling his funeral home, which was in Bensonhurst, New York. But after he sold it, the new owner noticed some really unsettling things. First, it came to his attention when he took new ownership that some of the past customers of Joseph Nicelli were cheated out of money. And so they were coming to the new owner and saying, like, I already paid for these services and I'm owed them. And of course, the new owner is like, but that wasn't with me. I'm the new owner. Like, you have to take that up with Nicelli, right?
Yeah.
And I think the new owner caught wind that there was kind of a scam going on. So it appeared that Nicelli had been cheating customers out of their funeral deposits, and the new owner was being contacted for restitution. Something else really weird that the new owner noticed was that there was what appeared to be a hidden operating room at the funeral home.
Now, why would anybody need that?
And the operating room was fitted with surgical lights and a mechanical lift for hoisting bodies from the first floor up to the second floor.
Okay, why was it hidden, though?
Exactly, right. And obviously, it couldn't have been hidden that well if the new owner found it. And I don't know how it was hidden. I don't know if you, like, pulled a book on a bookcase and it, like, rotated.
This guy was just checking out all the nooks and crannies of his new funeral home. He has to check it for ghosts and whatnot.
Yeah. So the new owner contacts the police, mostly because of the financial scam, but also whenever the detective, her name was Patricia O'Brien, showed up, she decided that it was worth looking into, so she opened up a broader investigation of the funeral home. Okay. So first, Detective O'Brien noticed that Nicelli had associations with several companies that processed human tissue for transplants.
Oh no.
Are you following me?
Oh no.
So when they found out that this freelance embalmer had like business associations with, do you know what I mean by companies that process human tissue for transplants?
So he's selling body parts from the funeral home.
Like on your driver's license, you might be listed as an organ donor, right? So after someone dies, within 24 hours, that body can be stripped of certain parts and they can be donated. Most people, they sign up to be like free donors, right? So there's no compensation to the family or anything.
Yeah.
But obviously with this guy, there was no consent happening.
Uh-huh.
The detective decides that she is going to exhume some of the bodies that were processed through this funeral home, and they examine the corpses that he had processed, and they realize that they might have an illegal body snatching ring right there in New York.
What the hell?
Investigators discovered one corporation in particular called Biomedical Tissue Services, which I think is kind of funny, is BTS, which makes me think of the K-pop group. So from now on, if I say BTS, don't think K-pop, think Biomedical Tissue Services.
Noted. I'll write that down.
So investigators discovered one corporation in particular called Biomedical Tissue Services that was headquartered out of Fort Lee, New Jersey, and it was owned by a man named Michael Mastromarino. So a little bit of information about Michael Mastromarino. So he owns Biomedical Tissue Services, BTS, right? So Michael Mastromarino was a 44-year-old failed oral surgeon who lost his license in the year 2000 because he was abusing prescription painkillers.
Oh.
And only a year later, so a year after he loses his license, so in 2001, he and Joseph Nicelli founded their tissue procurement business.
Oh, that's not sketchy.
Michael Mastromarino and Joseph Nicelli would find funeral directors in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and even sometimes Canada, and they would pay them thousands of dollars per body if they'd allow them to remove bones and tissue before burial.
So, is this guy's cancerous pelvic bone going to go into somebody else's body, and they're going to get cancer, and they die from cancer because of the transplant? Oh my fucking God.
So, yeah, I'm going to get there. So this is going to get really big. Very quickly, this business gets really lucrative. Mm-hmm. It gets so lucrative that Michael and Joseph have to take on, well, it doesn't get huge. It's lucrative, but it doesn't take a lot of manpower. In total, they only have 4 guys. Mm-hmm. Soon, the business becomes so lucrative that Michael and Joseph take on 2 more associates. Their names are Lee Cruchetta and Chris Alderossi, whom they refer to as the Cutters.
Why am I getting strong mafia vibes at this point now?
Because they all have Italian names?
Yeah.
That's probably why.
And they're in New York. So.
And they're the Cutters?
Yeah, the Cutters. Cutting up the bodies.
Okay, so in total, BTS, Biomedical Tissue Services, was supplying 5 different large tissue processing firms with parts that they had harvested from unconsenting persons, totaling over 1,000 by the time police caught wind of their illegal operation. So by the time the police are even catching on to this, they've already harvested from about 1,000 dead bodies.
I'm speechless.
How did this happen?
Yeah, how does...
But it gets worse because
of course it does.
Not only were the bodies being robbed of their parts, which in and of itself, right, is bad, but proper procedures were not being followed to ensure that quality products were being harvested for transplant.
Quality products.
So in the case of Alistair Cook, his death certificate was actually illegally altered to say that he had died from a heart attack and that he was 10 years younger so that his body parts qualified for transplant.
Okay, hold on. So it's not just that the funeral director and the failed oral surgeon didn't know that these people were dying from like cancer or other things that could be passed to unsuspecting donor recipients. It's that they didn't care.
Yeah.
That's evil,
right?
Yeah.
But it was very lucrative and money talks, right? So like I said, Alistair Cook had cancer in his bones, but then his bones were harvested and they were sold to major companies that then used them for transplants, right? His bones should have been unusable.
They were unusable.
So on top of the obvious issues of theft and corpse violation and fraud, there were also as many as 10,000 donor recipients that could have received dangerous or diseased tissue unknowingly.
Oh my God.
Which, I had to look this up. Do you know what the definition of tissue is?
No, absolutely not.
So, because you picture something, right? So what do you picture when someone says like human tissue?
I picture soft tissue, but I know that there's like tissue in bones, like bone tissue. So I imagine like the inside of a bone as well.
So apparently a tissue is literally just anything that isn't an organ.
Oh.
So bone is tissue, your ligaments, like your tendons, anything that isn't an organ is considered tissue. So defense attorney Charles Hines was able to piece together how the entire process worked, and this is what he alleges they were doing. Because when they're eventually caught, I'll just tell you right now, they deny everything. They're like, this was totally legal, we weren't forging anything, right? So it's up to the DA to kind of piece together like how he thinks their operation was working. So this is his guess. Okay. He says, I think Mastromarino would learn from one of his many associates in the funeral trade that someone had recently died. He would then send Nicelli to go pick up the body and take it back to his funeral home in Bensonhurst, where he had the secret operating room. If the deceased was slated for embalming and viewing, they removed only the bones from the waist down, replacing the missing parts with PVC pipe to fill out the clothing and prevent suspicion.
What?
Yes. Is that not creepy?
Don't loved ones normally dress their deceased? Maybe that's only where like I grew up, but I don't know.
I don't know. I've never dressed a dead body.
I haven't either.
I've heard of my family members dressing the deceased, but
yeah.
I think it might come down to religious.
That makes sense. Okay.
Culture.
Okay.
And the reason that they think this is because there were x-rays of the exhumed bodies. So remember, they exhumed some of the bodies and they x-rayed them. And it revealed that miscellaneous items such as gloves and aprons had also been used to falsify the bodies.
They were just shoving whatever in there.
Yeah. So they were filling out the bodies so that if there was a viewing and the people at the funeral looking at them wouldn't be able to tell. Because who's going to open up the pants, you know? Because that'd be weird.
Hopefully nobody. But if somebody did that at a funeral I was at, I'd be out in less than a second flat. I'd be like, and that's enough for me. Goodbye.
So they could rely on nobody's going to be looking, right? If it looks normal from the outside, there's no reason to investigate.
Yeah.
So in addition to falsifying the bodies and putting random garbage items like gloves and aprons to make them look normal from the outside, they would also screw the feet to pipes and put some shoes on, filling hollow areas with socks.
Alrighty then. They had a whole system down. A whole way to make bodies look like bodies. I mean, make random items look like bodies.
Here's the thing, though. I can't find any information about Alderossi or Crocetta, the cutters. Did they have experience with this? Or did they literally just find some, random guys off the street and they're like, hey, are you comfortable, cutting up some bodies? And they're like, sure.
Oh my God.
Was there, a learning curve? They're like, I've never had to screw on someone's feet before, but I think I can do it.
That is, so wild and terrifying to me because don't organ donations have to be incredibly sterile?
Yes.
Oh my God.
You're not trusting these guys to be sterile?
Absolutely not. They're nicknamed the Cutters, Hannah. Honestly, this sounds like to me that whatever his name was, what's his name? Nicelli?
Yeah.
Nicelli walked into a butcher shop and was like, yo, can I speak to your cutters? And the cutters came out and he's like, what are they paying you here? I can pay $10 more an hour. And they were like, shit, we'll leave this place, not ask any questions. That's what it sounds like to me. But then again, I have absolutely no education on what the happened because
I can't find any information on who these guys are. They come out of nowhere yeah, we just hired 2 guys. And I don't know if they hired experienced embalmers. They're like, oh, you have experience. Or I don't know where their credentials are coming from is what I'm saying. This is where it gets a little gross. Well, it already was gross. We talked about what happens if the body is slated for public viewing, right?
Yeah.
But if the body was slated for cremation and there was no viewing, Nicelli was essentially free to just pick the body clean. And so he was taking heart valves, fatty tissue, tendons, ligaments, veins, and even skin. And the family would just receive the cremated ashes of all the leftover parts, and they wouldn't know what had actually happened to their loved one.
That's insane.
It's just so problematic on so many levels. We've talked about first, the non-consenting part, right? Just taking the organs when the family doesn't know, and the person who died never consented to organ donation, right?
Yeah.
So that alone was bad. And then you find out that they're falsifying documents and saying, oh, these people actually died from something else, and they're actually 10 years younger, and we can harvest their organs. But then they're giving possibly disease-ridden tissue. They're selling potentially diseased tissue to these processing facilities to then be put into living patients.
This is also gross, but I've been to an autopsy, a couple autopsies, of a murder-suicide, specifically. And the autopsy hospital I went to, I wonder if it was their policy, because at the time I was like, why are they doing that? But now I'm like, oh, that actually makes sense. The autopsy doctor would cut up all of the organs into little tiny pieces, and then they stored them all together back inside the person in little individual bags. But I wonder if they did that on purpose so that nobody could steal organs and sell them.
That would be my guess, too, is that they just don't want them getting sold on the black market.
Yeah, so take out the heart, cut it into little tiny pieces, put it in a bag, put it back into the person. Same with all of the organs.
It sounds just like when you get a turkey at Thanksgiving and they got the bag of giblets.
Yes, I didn't eat meat for 6 months after going to autopsy because it was something. That's for damn sure.
I don't even know if I'd be able to handle it.
It was when I worked in the special victims unit and all of the detectives were harassing me the whole way there. They were like, you're going to throw up. We all made bets that you're going to throw up. I did not throw up and I didn't leave the room, but some of the other detectives did.
And you said, suck it.
Yeah, I did actually.
So, in total, the police were able to get an accurate count of 1,077 corpses that they believe were illegally harvested between just 2001 and 2005, so just a 4-year span.
Holy shit.
So, if my math is right, that's about 1,000 bodies in 4 years. That's 250 a year? And there's only 365 days in a year, right? So that's like a new body every day.
That's insane.
And of those 1,000 bodies, they were able to find only one that actually had what appeared to be a valid consent form.
Oh my god.
Just one.
It's almost funnier that there was actually one with a consent form.
Yeah.
Like, it would make sense to me if there were none, but just one. Like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
In like an ironic way, I guess.
Yeah. Just the one.
Yeah, just the one.
So all the rest had been forged. And so the police had a lot of work cut out for them because they had to contact all of these families. So that's when Alistair Cook's daughter was contacted 18 months later, right? When they're like, so bad news. Your father's body was robbed of its parts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously these families were shocked and they were upset to find out the truth about what had happened after their loved ones had died. I would be
royally pissed.
Really, really upset because that's desecration, right? Like your loved one is getting picked apart by these random guys in a secret operating room.
Yep. Which also, really quick, can I just say how, like, if he just made the operating room not secret, this might have not come to light. Like, if it was just another operating room.
Yeah. So he loses his oral surgeon license in 2000. He starts a tissue processing company by 2001, and by 2005, he's being questioned for illegal activities. But in those 4 years, Michael Mastromarino is estimated to have made about $4.7 million.
Oh my.
And there's only 4 of them, right?
Yeah.
So, like, assuming that he's probably paying the cutters not that much, he's taking home a huge chunk of change, right?
Yeah. Or he's paying them really well and he's still taking home that much.
Yes. But get this. So his operation, he swindled between 30 and 40 different funeral homes. So there were between 30 and 40 different and distinct funeral homes who were supplying him with bodies.
But how?
That hasn't been explained because he has never confessed to like his operation or how he was doing it. My best guess is that he was reaching out to the funeral homes and saying, oh, the family filled out this consent form to be organ donors, so I'm going to send my embalmer down there. Now Chelly's going to pick it up. We're going to take the organs, or we're going to take the tissue, and we're going to give the body back to you, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that they knew that anything was weird.
That is so f***ed up.
So they were paying the funeral homes, they said roughly $1,000 for each body.
Okay.
But BTS was earning about $200,000 to $250,000 per body.
Oh my god.
Which is an insane return. When confronted with all of these allegations, Michael Mastromarino insisted that he didn't commit forgery and that it wasn't his responsibility to procure the consent of the families before processing the bodies. He argued that it was the funeral home's responsibility to ensure consent.
Oh my god. Pure unadulterated audacity.
But where does the liability, or where does the responsibility lie? Because I'm on the fence because I feel like the funeral homes also should have been doing more to like...
They totally should have.
Right?
They 100% should have. They were like, oh, okay, I guess we'll just hand over this body to you. This actually is the perfect crime because everything is very delicate when it comes to like the passing of loved ones, right? And so the funeral home probably doesn't want to reach out to the family members for every little thing, especially if there's documents involved that they think are legit. And so they see the document and they're like, well, why would I call the family to like talk about this really delicate and probably hard thing to talk about? Like just to ask them to make sure it's okay when I have the documentation right here telling me that it's okay. Like that's what I'm imagining the funeral homes that got swindled.
1,000 times? Like they did this 1,000 times, and there was never an instance where the funeral director was like, "Oh, your loved one's not here because they're off getting their organs removed right now."
Yeah. I
feel like that would happen at least once, that someone would be like, "Excuse me?"
Right? Like when my grandpa died, I went to the funeral home like randomly and was like, "Can I see him?" And they let me see him. No, I did. When my grandpa died, I went to the funeral home and I was like, "Can I see him?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." And they brought him into a room. But like, I didn't have an appointment or anything. So I imagine like if I had went in there and was like, "Can I see my grandpa?" And they were like, "Sorry, his organs are being harvested right now." I would have been like, "What the fuck? He didn't sign up for that shit."
But at least with this case, it does have a good ending.
Okay.
Kind of, which is that the FDA obviously shuts down BTS, and they do investigate a bunch of the funeral directors, and 7 different funeral directors pled guilty to undisclosed charges. So we don't know what they were charged with, but they were charged with something, they pled guilty, and they agreed to cooperate as witnesses in the case against BTS.
Okay.
So Mastromarino, Nicelli, Crucetta, and Alderossi, the 4 men who comprised the business, they all insisted that they were innocent. According to an account from Crucetta, one of the men tasked with cutting up the bodies, he said, "It took about 45 minutes to remove the bones and only 15 minutes to remove the skin from specific areas." He says apparently they would perform as many as 6 or 7 extractions a day.
That is horrific.
6 or 7 a day.
I know everybody has like operates with reality differently, but I can't imagine like peeling the skin off of a person and then going home to like your wife and kids. Like, what's for dinner? Oh my god, that like takes the wind out of me a little bit thinking about it too much.
So, like, yeah, and maybe they did just find these guys at a butcher shop, and they're like, "Yeah, I deal with this every day." But Alderossi and Crucetta, the cutters, their explanation essentially was that they didn't, and I might believe them, I'm not even sure, that they didn't know that it was an illegal operation. I don't really know, like, how involved they were. It's possible that they just showed up and they thought they were doing their job and then they went home, you know?
I would believe that, honestly.
But I don't know. It depends all on Mastromarino and how good he was at making it all look legitimate. I mean, it looked legitimate enough that all these funeral homes were in on it, and all of the companies buying the tissue, they were in on it.
Yeah,
right?
Not knowing if the cutters were part of the industry beforehand, assuming that they weren't, I would also give them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know how fucked up this was.
The scariest thing is that, like, this was only 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago, and I can't help but wonder how many more industries like this aren't being federally regulated or watched closely enough, and whether or not I can even trust. So, a funny account from the detective, Patricia O'Brien. Some of the tissue donated from deceased bodies is used for, like, dental work. And apparently, after the investigation, she had to go in for dental work, and she was paranoid because she was like, "Do you have to use donated bone, or do you have to use donated tissue?"
Yeah.
And because after the case, she was like terrified of organ donation and whether or not it's trustworthy or where all the parts were coming from, right?
I want to know exactly who this came from, and I want it tested.
Yeah, because, I mean, what are the odds that Michael Mastromarino is the only person who's involved in this?
Yeah, exactly. How did they get involved so quickly and easily?
Yeah, so a little healthy dose of skepticism.
Thank you.
It also
for that.
made me not want to get cremated, because I'm just like, what if I sign up for cremation or I consent to cremation and they pick my bones clean? You know what I mean?
I mean, even if you didn't sign up for cremation, they'll just pick your lower half clean.
Yeah. Stay away from my lower half.
They're like, "These are nice buttocks. We'll take them."
They replaced my leg bones with PVC pipe? No. Absolutely not.
That's not funny, but it is like so absurd that I can't not laugh. Like, what the fuck?
So eventually, Mastromarino and all 3 of his employees were convicted in February of 2006, and Mastromarino received a sentence of 18 to 54 years. But this got reduced later in 2008 because he eventually pled guilty. He was like, yeah, I did this. So they reduced his sentence, but if you want to hear the best instance of karma, Mastromarino passed away from bone cancer in 2013 at the age of 49.
Holy shit. Alistair came back. Alistair was like, this bitch.
But that's all I have. That's all I have for you today. It's not a very long story, but I thought it was very interesting and also very terrifying. It involves elements of crime, New York, possibly mobsters. We don't know.
Cutters. Well, thank you for that. I feel a little bit nauseous now. So.
Well, yeah. No. Tell me about how you feel. Like, does this change your perspective on anything?
This does make me more worried that something like this is happening, because I'll be very honest. This is something I haven't really thought about because I haven't experienced a lot of death in my life. Like, I haven't been surrounded by a lot of death. And so I haven't been to a lot of funeral homes, been to a lot of, like, you know, had to think about the processes of that. And I hope I don't anytime soon. So I'm knocking on wood. Just knowing now that that's a thing, that people are doing this, that it's so willy-nilly and you could potentially forge a lot of documents, that's going to make me be super, like, involved. But I'm going to be very much involved and very much, I want all of the steps. I want you to call me for every little thing. I want to be involved from A to Z, and you better involve me in all of it.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you can't trust even the professionals or people you're being told are professionals. And maybe it would be a good idea to dress your deceased loved ones so you just know that their legs aren't actually PVC and their feet aren't screwed on, you know? And their pants aren't stuffed with newspaper or something. You know what I mean?
Socks, newspaper and socks.
And, like, not everyone has close family that's gonna, like, advocate for them or advocate for their bodies after death, which is really sad.
Yeah.
But, like, if you have that privilege, you know, if you have family that maybe put it in your will, like, don't leave my body alone with...
And we didn't even touch on, like, the other horrendous things that happen to bodies after the person is deceased and they go to, like, mortuaries and funeral homes and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, it's a cultural thing that's different depending on where you go in the world, where what the processes are after someone dies.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually seen arguments that the entire funeral industry is a scam.
I
essentially
believe that.
Like, it's just, I mean, it's a big money-making scam. And I can honestly get on board with that. Like, do bodies need to be embalmed? Not really.
No.
And the caskets, have you seen how expensive caskets are?
They're so expensive.
What are they, like 10 grand or something?
Sometimes more.
So this episode is also a PSA that funeral homes are a scam. No, I think people should do whatever they are comfortable with their loved ones after death. If that means embalming, if that means burial, if that means cremation, like, more power to you. But I personally am going to be very skeptical of giving my loved ones or even my own body to these industries that exist to make money.
It kind of makes you think about how many, like, human experiences the society we've created separate us from. Like, birth, for example, has become very much a business, the business of giving birth, right? Like, they rush mothers in and they rush them out, and it causes a lot of problems for women and people who give birth, right? Like, because it leads to a lot of medical neglect and issues surrounding that, not catering birth to individual people, but treating it like it's a standard procedure for every single person. That's not how it should work. It separates you from your humanity. It dehumanizes you in a large way to do it like that. But we've just decided that it's a money-making industry, and that's the way we're going to do it, even though it hurts people in the long run, and it's worse for society because it makes rich people a lot of money. And the same thing with death, right? Like, we have separated our humanity from this experience in a way where people used to take care of the people who passed away and kind of did all those, for the burial process was done out of love and respect for the person they used to be, and now it's handed off to somebody else. And I totally understand like wanting to separate yourself from it because it's deeply traumatic and really terrible and hard, and you're really fragile in that state. But also there's a part of me that's like, it's probably a valuable experience to have as a human being in some ways, like psychologically and even emotionally.
That's what it comes down to, is convenience, because it's very convenient to just pass on the responsibility to someone else to take care of the arrangement so that you can grieve, and then they'll worry about the casket, they'll worry about the plot, they'll worry about the gravestone or the cremation or whatever. My husband has said so many times, he's like, I don't need anything fancy, just put me in a pine box. He said the saddest thing to me the other day. I started crying. Oh. We were driving past a cemetery on Mother's Day, and if you go near a cemetery on Father's Day or Mother's Day, there's usually people there taking flowers to their mothers and fathers that have passed away. And we were driving past one, and I saw a bunch of people, and Nathaniel saw all the people, and he said, Hannah, after I'm dead and buried, you don't need to visit me. He goes, I'm not there. And I just broke down, like I was sobbing, because I was just like, because I think people visit graves, right, because they feel like they want to be close to that person.
Yeah, it's the last place they know of, right?
Yeah, and so I was just like, well, if you're not there, then like, what choice do I have? Like, how do I feel closer to you? And then it kind of made me think, like, honestly, the closest that you can be to someone who's passed away, I feel like, is to continue talking about them, is to continue thinking about your memories with them, because that's where they really are.
Yeah.
You know, is the life you had with them and the memories, but not really their physical body, because once they're gone, I feel like they're gone.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for tuning in for this week's episode of Crime Soup Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's story. Be sure to find us on social media and let us know your thoughts and theories. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We also have an awesome website, crimesouppodcast.com, where you can listen to all of our episodes and even buy your very own Crime Soup merch. As always, we'll see you next Tuesday. Stay safe and bon appetit.
Brah.
Brrr.